All right, I'm here with Scott Rempe, and we're going to be talking today about all the kinds of different art that you create and you're going to give some insights on the value of art. And I'm excited to talk to you because I am just dipping my toes into illustration a little bit. And I have started to do a little like cartoon book thing, and I've put it away because I got frustrated with it. And so
Okay.
that's about all I know about illustration. But tell me about your journey as an artist and teacher so far.
Sure. So I grew up in a house where my dad worked in business, and my mom was home with eventually four kids. And so my dad always said that was the hard job. So as a mom, she also was an artist. She liked to do watercolors, and so just was observing that from her at a young age. They always kind of had art supplies for us that were around. As you can imagine, with four kids, we were tearing through it. So they kept us well stocked. And if my dad found stuff at work that was getting tossed out, paper, that kind of stuff, he'd bring it home, and we just, especially me, we draw on it. So it was something that I was, always interested in from a very young age, and having, encouraging parents, both one as an artist and just a dad who was encouraging as well, was helpful to kind of fuel that interest for me um, as a youngster. And then as I thought about talking to you, I was thinking about influences. After that, I had a grade school art teacher. His name was Mr. Bear, believe it or not, Bear, which I thought was the coolest thing ever. And
Mhm.
so Mr. Bear wore a white lab coat. And in that lab coat, he had pens and markers. I mean, he would just pull this stuff out, and he'd teach classes that, to me, it was the best. We had him once a week. But when you think about how people influence your life, he passed away, but I wrote to his wife and said, you don't probably even know who I am, but this is what your husband did that impacted the rest of my life. Um, so that's pretty cool, and I think it started to instill in me, what if I eventually wanted to become an artist or become a teacher. So those are a couple of things that when I was younger, I was just focused on that, and that kind of kickstarted it for me.
Awesome. Okay, so now you do illustrations, and what kind of illustrations do you do?
Sure, I'm a little all over the map, because I actually read your book on murals, and we can talk about that a little bit. I didn't expect to get into murals, but I was primarily more of a cartoonist. I used my sense of humor, and my drawing always just kind of moved in that direction. It's what amused me. It's what amused other people. So when I started to find out that if I could draw something and other students would laugh, or at one point I could figure out that I could sell them to them. So I was like, well, this is fascinating. My younger brother at one point said, I don't understand how Scott's getting ice cream every day. And the reason I was we were supposed to get it one day a week, and I was getting it 5 days a week because I was cartooning and selling them for, a dime or a quarter, but that was enough to get ice cream. So that was, inspired me to say, all right, there's something to this. But eventually that kind of worked into different areas. I've published five different children's books, all at different levels, meaning some of them are in the education space. So I had a client, Kaplan, which is here in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, education company, and they said, hey, we need you to draw these 30 images for a matching game that we're putting together. So that might be a job that I did for them. But eventually that led to them saying, I know an artist who the illustrator is not doing a good job. And are you interested in that? So I was definitely interested because a year before that, I said, boy, I'd like to do a children's book before I die. And so I'm kind of a big goal setter, and all of a sudden you kind of put it out there. And I've heard you talk about it as well as your guests. If you set stuff out there in the universe, it's amazing how often that comes to light and it happens. So outside of that, I have clients where I do anything from corporate calendars. I worked for BB&T, which has now become Truist, and I was in the marketing department there, and I saw the newsletter and I found out what they were paying somebody to do artwork there. And I said, I can do this as an employee and I'd love to get the exposure. So, again, just different areas to do that. Um, so my art just, it depends on what the need is. Um, the murals actually evolved also out of the bank. We were doing a volunteer day and they said, "Hey, we need this wall done and this small mural." And they said, "Oh, I'll bet Rempe can do that. Why don't we ask him?" So the first year it was this small, 4 foot high retaining wall in front of this building in a complex that needed to be kind of spruced up. And then the next year, Ronald McDonald House, they said, "Oh, Rempe can do a mural there." And next thing I know, we're doing a mural there. So that's what really attracted me to reading your book, because I was like, there's a good business out there for murals, but you got to learn it. So those are examples of different things that I do. And then I've done my own Christmas cards for probably 36, 37 years. It's just a nice way to get my name out there. And I just found that people were like, yeah, I get one, maybe two that are handmade every year. And so those are different things that I do.
Very cool. So, do you have a certain kind of style that you stuck in, or do you change your style based on what your customers want?
That's a good question. I'd back up a little bit to say, I don't know about you, but I think every artist struggles with style for a long time. I grew up on Mad Magazine. You're like, wow, I wish I could be Mort Drucker, Jack Davis, just guys I thought were outstanding. But eventually I had to let that go and just say my style is my style. And I would just tell people, if it doesn't fit your project, that's fine. Just let me know. But it is what it is. And I worried less and less about that. And it just kind of evolved. So definitely cartoony. Sometimes people will say, "Oh, I didn't understand that," which I'm fine with. They didn't get the joke, or, everybody's not going to get it sometimes, or maybe it's just not as funny. But that style portion, it really does evolve. And to answer your question, I can also, if they say, "Here's what we'd like, can you do this?" Most of the times I can adjust my style. I can copy a style that they want. But I'm also sensitive as an artist to say, I don't want somebody to hire me to do something that says, "Oh, you're copying this person's work." I just don't do that.
Yeah. Okay. So, how do you price? I'm always interested in different art variations, how you determine what something costs, because we do, per hour or square foot. What do you do?
Sure. So part of what we'll talk about today is understanding client budgets is a huge thing, and understanding the questions that you need to ask to do that. So, some people say, "Oh, I charge by the hour," and I'm not sure how they do that, because I know some artists that it might take them 10 hours to do something and it might take me 3. So typically I'm just trying to figure out how many images are they asking me to draw? What size are the images? Is it just black and white? Is it color? If it's color, there's different levels of detail, just like in the mural business, where you could be putting flat colors on, and that's one thing. But if you're airbrushing and really putting detail on there, and it's going to take you longer, then I take that into account. And I also try to take into account how much time do I have to spend outside of actual drawing. If the person wants to meet with me, or if I have to go meet them somewhere, those are true costs of either your time or gas or whatever it is that you have to take into consideration, and then come up with a cost. So typically what I'm looking at is, all right, if someone says, "Oh, I want you to do these 5 images," I'll give them a cost per image. And I'll also share with them that that image includes 2 rounds of revision once they've approved kind of initial sketches. And I do very undetailed sketches. I can do something quick and say, "All right, this is going to be a guy, swinging this bucket, and there's going to be stuff coming out of it. Here's how it's going to look. Here's how it's going to lay out." And I get them to approve those early stages. So I don't draw all the way to the end, color it in, and then they go, "Yeah, I don't like this. I don't need a guy with a bucket. I need a giraffe bouncing a basketball." Uh,
Yeah.
but I've done that before, or artists tell me all the time, "Oh, the client did this to me." And I always ask them, "Well, did they do it to you, or did you maybe not ask a question that would have prevented you from drawing that way?
That's a great point. Yes. And so just to get on that subject, what kind of questions do you ask ahead of time that you found have really helped you, in the long run?
Sure, it may help to give you a little background. My day job is I'm in sales and marketing. So when I first got into sales, I learned all the bad closes that they tell you, the hard close, the soft close, the around the back close, and you just learn all these things that you think you're supposed to learn in your early 20s. And so you use them, and what I found out was like not very many of those worked. In fact, a lot of them agitated people.
Like what?
Hey, if I need you to close today, what would it take for you to buy this artwork from me today, or buy this car, or and and people
Mhm.
do that. What would it take me? And that doesn't make me feel comfortable. I don't know about you if I'm purchasing something. Um,
Yeah.
so over time and through a lot of training and some excellent training, I just learned to start asking questions that revolved around, hey, you've got a pretty good idea about what you want. Do you have a budget in mind for this? It's a safe question. It doesn't feel offensive. And because they could say what? They could say, yes, we have a budget in mind. That's great because now you have the answer. They could say, no, we don't have a budget in mind. They could say, no, I'm not sharing the budget with you. But my experience is that more often than not, they're willing to share that information if you ask it in a way that makes them feel comfortable sharing it with you. And once you have that conversation, now you're starting to have this trust factor in a conversation that's totally different, especially from an artist perspective. They get angry about, boy, they quoted me this, and then the invoice from the artist came back and it was this. Or the artist gets
Mm.
angry and they say, well, I quoted them this, and then they made me do all this other stuff, and yet they don't charge for it. So a question like that, hey, you've done this in the past, is another way to ask that same question. You're asking me to do this calendar. Sounds like you've done it 2 other times. In those cases, if everything is similar, about what type of a range, and now you're giving them, again, not a hard number, a soft range, what might that look like? If I hear things like, oh, it won't take you long to do this. Um, we don't have much budget at all. Red flags start going up. And I know through some of your podcasts and your book that happens with a lot of people. And if they don't have money, then you should be asking yourself, is this really a good client for you? Or could it be a nightmare down the road? And people who say they don't have money, they have money. You have to figure out the questions to ask, and if they don't, then it's okay to say this isn't a good fit for me. So I don't know if that helps answer that question or not.
It does, and it just helps to validate the pricing conversations that I have recently. I will tell somebody, "This is gonna cost around, 1 to 2,000," something like that, and then gauge their answer. So and I don't know where I got that from. I don't know if I maybe made it up or it just started working, so I used it. So I like that you're using it as well. I'm like, "Okay, I feel like I'm doing the right thing." So I thank you for sort of validating that. But how are you having these conversations? Are you having them through email, through text, on the phone, in person?
Sure. And before we go on to that, I just thought of something when you mentioned that. When you have that conversation, the other thing is observe how the person reacts. Because some people, their eyes get big and they're like, oh, and some people don't react at all. And so that's a different reaction for you to say, okay, they didn't, fall off their chair when I said 1 to 2,000. My guess is that, years ago you might have said, I'm going to ask for 500 and it's going to be the most money I've ever asked for. Well, now you're asking for 1,000 to 2,000 because of the things you've taught in your book and your experience and your client level, and you have a child, and you're not willing to do it for 500. So, um, but in the environments that I do it in person is my preference for a lot of reasons. So if somebody's local, I'd like to, hey, why don't we meet and have coffee, or sit down and have a conversation about this? It's just easier because then you can listen to the person. Body language is important. It's a lot easier to bond over a cup of coffee than an email. Um, I know that many artists are like, yeah, I don't do that. That's
Mhm.
not how I roll. But I would just encourage them to say, well, are you missing opportunities because of what can happen when you're in person? The other thing that I'm talking about in some of these presentations is just the importance of how you communicate. Are you communicating and writing what the expectation was after you've had a phone call to discuss it? That's a really big thing for me in my art is telling them what I heard them say. I heard you say you're struggling with this. I heard you say you lost the artist because that artist just was not producing the work on time. And I heard you say that this deadline for the end of July is really important to your company. I'm going to reiterate that back to them. One, because they've said it, but it's also a reminder to them, boy, he's really paying attention to what my concerns are, what my pain is, what my hot buttons are. And I don't think a lot of artists do that. So the beauty of that, Andrea, is that all of a sudden, if you're having these conversations at that level, the client or the prospect is starting to say, there's something different about this artist. They're more professional, they're more prepared, they're really understanding what my concerns are. And when you do that, I can almost guarantee you can charge more for what you're doing because they don't want the last situation to happen again.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah, it's definitely easier to gauge in person or, at best, like on the phone or something. I feel like I've talked to so many artists lately who get ghosted, and I'm like, well, how are you communicating? They're like, through email or in direct messages, and they just stop responding. And it leaves you with such a, why did they stop responding? Did the price scare them? Did they not see my message? It's just the whirlwind of things happen in my mind and everybody else's, and it's just like having that conversation in person takes so much less time, and you can just get it done so much quickly or faster. And, yeah.
Well, and what you just mentioned is, and this is anybody, when you get excited about an opportunity and then they ghost you, most people go to what? They go to the negative thing. They hate me, they hate my price, they hate my art. All of a sudden, you're the worst person on the planet, but you've talked yourself into it. Another good thing to do, and it amazes me, is sometimes if I've been ghosted, I will just send an email and say something like, it seems like this isn't a priority anymore. So I'm going to just make a note and move on because I haven't heard from you the last couple times. Well, an amazing thing happens. Either they say you're right, which is good because now you can move on. You don't have to worry about it anymore, and you can just close that chapter. Or what happens more often is, I'm so sorry, I was out for 2 weeks, my kid was sick, my sister and her husband came in unexpected. There's all these other answers that were not in your head that were really what was going on. So when you try to close that chapter out and they go, no, 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 wait a second. But you're also saying I need to be respected for my time. I'm not going to, email you back 20 times.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's such a fine line of like follow up, and it feels so weird following up too. You're like, I was actually just thinking about this one follow up that I've been doing. I've sent them now 4 messages, and the last one was like, "Are you interested?" And I can tell it's Instagram direct message, and I can see that they read it, but they just don't say anything, and I'm like, why? So I'm just gonna keep sending it because no shame.
So if you tweak it, the only tweak is to say, sounds like you're not interested, because now you're pushing the other way. You're saying, are you interested?
Okay.
I would tweak it to say, sounds like you're not interested, and
Okay,
see
I'll
if you
send
don't
that
get it.
one.
Because that forces the issue in a way that's different. And that's really what you want to know. If you're not interested, that's fine. Let's move on.
Okay, yeah. I'll just say, it sounds like you're not interested. Um, can you confirm this? Is that a good ending or
Yeah, it sounds like, well, you don't even ask them to confirm because you're basically going to shut it down. If you said, it sounds like you're not interested, I'm going to go ahead and file this conversation away until it becomes more of a priority for you. Respectful tone is different, but it's not saying, is that true? It's just saying, you've already told me it's true by not responding. And so that's going to feel uncomfortable.
No,
um,
I'm okay with it. That's
but
fine.
I'm
It's
telling you, when they either say it's over or my bad, I've had a lot going on. Again, you look different than other artists by doing that. They're not used to getting pushback to do that.
Okay, I'm gonna send that today.
Good,
I'll
good
let
luck. Let
people
me know
know.
how that goes.
I will. Okay, so pricing is one way to value your art. You know, that's that, and a lot of artists have a hard time with it, especially moving up. I have a conversation a lot with people who like when is the best time to raise your rates because you start out doing things for low cost just to get a portfolio built up and it's like knowing your worth it's like it comes after a while. You know,
Sure.
usually artists aren't going into it being like I have the best product ever, I'm going to charge however much. Like it's a build up. Can you talk a little bit about how to start valuing your work as a beginner artist and then a intermediate and as you go up?
Sure. So remember, I started charging a dime to 25 cents. So I've really raised my raised my bar since I was in elementary school. But you're right. The other thing I would say is, I spoke to the National Cartoon Society. I'm a member, but I spoke in Atlanta. And so I said, I want to give you some tangible things that you can leave with. I said, here's the first one. When you go home on Monday, raise your rates by 10 to 15% on Monday, not 2 months from now, not when you feel like it, on Monday. And I said, you're probably going to be a little nervous, but before you get nervous, I want to ask you this question. When's the last time that you have raised your rates? Knowing what I know through listening to you and reading your book, you've figured out priorities that allow you to do that. You've got enough clients, you can start to do that. But for the average artist, some of them might say, oh, I haven't raised it in 5 years. I
Hmm.
haven't raised it since COVID.
Mm.
Everything went up in COVID. If you're an artist, you have permission to raise your price post COVID. Everything else went up. Your cost of living is still going up. So how are you offsetting that? I told them, I said, I don't think any one of you is going to come back and say, well, Scott, out of the 10 clients, 9 said they refused my 10%, 15% increase. I said, I don't think anybody's going to say anything. And if they don't, in 6 months, I'd probably raise them again because you're probably undervaluing your art. Second thing is to ask peers. I'm sure you do a lot of this. Hey, I'm getting ready to do this mural, and here's what it is, and it's on brick, and it's going to be 90 degrees out. Here's about what I'm charging. What about you two? Is this in the ballpark? I certainly do that, and then I combine that with the budget dollars that the client's given me, but just looking for ways to say, how can I understand how to increase that price, and research is part of it. The internet can certainly give you some of that, but I think your peers, depending on what part of the country you're in or what type of art you're doing, those are the best people to hear it from, because you'll probably get somebody that's not charging enough, somebody that's doing pretty good, but then somebody's going to say to you, you ought to raise your price by 30%, and here's why. The quality of your work is better than, this. I'm getting this. I think you can get it. And
Mhm.
if you're with a new prospect, they don't know what your price is anyway. So if you tested it out and said, hey, the next prospect, my mural is going to be 25% more than the most I've ever done. And if they accept it, you're like, why didn't I do that 12 months ago?
Yep, I had a
Yeah, I don't want to make it sound like, oh, this is super easy. But when I ask people when they've done it, they're like, yeah, I've never tried that. Right.
yeah.
I'm not comfortable with that. I was like, I get it. It's going to be uncomfortable.
Yep. Yeah, and it's I think with practice it helps, but even I sometimes I just had a conversation with a client not very long ago. I want to say it was like a week and a half ago, and they were telling me the red flag things of, we're not sure how much it's going to cost. Like we don't know if we can afford it. And so I was like, oh, I really want to do this, and I was like, okay, this is going to cost like probably around like 2,000. I'm like, okay, well we might do two of them then. I was like, yeah, dang it. I was like, oh man. Immediately. I'm like, all right, great.
Yes. Well, and you've heard this too. Answering first puts you in a position that is not a position of strength. So if let's just, there's a big Pepsi place here. So let's say Pepsi came to me and said, hey, how much are you going to charge for that mural or that billboard illustration, as an example? and I think, oh my gosh, this is in my head. I'm click, 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 and I go, that's 6 grand. That's what I'm thinking, and that'd be a nice check. And I just blurt out, it's probably going to be 6 grand, 6,500. And I'll tell you what hurts is when they go, that's great. I had a $10,000 budget. That hurts. And that can happen because you've thrown a number out. And so that's why I like asking in ranges. Hey, I certainly can give you a number, but from a budget standpoint or in your head, what are you thinking based on, there's a lot of things that could be variables here. What are you thinking? Well, could you get us between 8 and 10? Yeah,
Mhm.
I can answer that question now. Yes, I can. I can do it between $8 and $10,000. And maybe you say 9,500. Well, you just increase your price by 50% by asking the budget question, asking for a range, and then getting them to feel comfortable, but also understanding you're dealing with a corporate client. And a corporate client is way more flexible than an individual in most cases. So most of my successful clients look more like corporate clients because I'm used to dealing with corporate clients in my day job as a sales and marketing person. I know they have better budgets in most cases. I know they have flexibility, and I also know they can find money somewhere else. So if I said $6,000 and they said I only got five and I didn't want to do it for five, then the question becomes, hey, are there other ways we can get to six? Give me a
Mm.
year's supply of Pepsi or whatever it is. But you can negotiate that in a way that they can figure it out.
Okay, yeah. I'm currently just relating this to my own life and thinking because I have a client right now who I did something for them last year, and it was 2 murals, and it was a job where I had to travel, so I was there for, like, 3 or 4 days, and then this year, they only want 1 mural for their event, but I'm still gonna be away the same amount of time, but I know that they're gonna come at me and say that the budget is gonna be half, and I don't really wanna do it for half, so I'm kinda trying to figure out how I can get it up a bit more. I mean, I'm gonna be working considerably less, but I'm still gonna be away. And so, yeah, maybe I could trade for merchandise. Maybe I could trade for something. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, and they're probably going to, oh, it's half of your time. Well, when you're getting on a plane, you don't cut your plane time in half. The hassle of doing that and staying in a hotel or whatever that is, that's a sunk cost essentially.
Mhm,
The amount of time you're doing the mural is going to be a little bit less. Um, but
mhm.
yeah, I would say try to push back on it. It's not an hourly rate thing. I still have a lot of the same time constraints or
Yeah,
you're not going to be able to do other work if you travel for 3 days is the other thing you can say. Hey, when I'm on the road traveling, I get nothing else done.
that's true.
So
Yeah, okay. That's a good point, and exactly what I was thinking in my head that I just, like, needed to say out loud to them, really. So I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, yeah." Um,
well, and what you just said is a great point. In my sales career, we used to do a lot of live training. We would do it before we went out to a client. That's some of the best stuff you can do. So if you said to a fellow artist, hey, I want to call you and walk through this presentation of budget and tell them to be tough on you. So if
mm,
you call them and this client, for example, and you walk them through it and just say, don't come out of role. I'm going to do exactly what I'm going to do. And it's going to be a live conversation. That will be much better than if you just pick up the phone and try to call them and, wing it and hope it goes well. Practice that before you do it is always good in my experience.
okay, yeah. Know what I'm gonna say ahead of time.
Yep.
Yeah,
And
okay.
conviction too. I
Yeah.
think I'm not talking about you because you have a level of confidence that is healthy, but a, a buyer of any product, but specifically illustration, if you just sound like you're hedging or if you're passive or, you have to, come across as, hey, I believe this is what it's worth. If you kind of sound like I'm not so sure I'm worth this, then guess what? They're going to treat you like maybe you're not worth what you're trying to get.
So true, and just to give an example of that, I was hiring it was like an e editor at some point, it was a few months ago, and I put a job posting up, and I got a call immediately because they had seen my job posting, and they're like, "Hello, I would like to apply." I was like, "Okay, just tell me about your, if you're gonna be a good fit." And it was a very good pitch, but in the end, I was like, "Okay, yeah, let's give it a try." And they go, "Really?" And I was like,
Yeah.
yeah,
How'd that feel?
really?" And I went with it, even though I was like, "That was weird." And it ended up not turning out very well. And I think about it back and I'm like, "Of course." Like, if somebody says, "Really? You're gonna hire me?" Like, then
That's how
they're
he told
probably,
my mom. "Really?"
yeah, like, "I could really go, thank you." Yeah, yeah, and it ended up working out. And I'm like, "Okay, well, lesson learned." So,
Well,
yeah, I guess.
you're actually speaking to, I mean, if you listen to the actual words that people are saying, they're different if they are, very interested versus they're just running you around. So um, they're gonna start presenting things to you about, hey, can we talk about costs and can we talk about what this looks like and do you have any concerns? The way that conversation is going tells you a lot. So if you're really, I take notes when I'm talking to a client all the time. I don't like to hang up and go, what would they say?
Mhm.
Uh, and that way I can reference that. But paying attention to the tone, the words they use. It's said in the interview process. My dad told me when I was younger, he's like, at some point the interview flips from you trying to sell yourself to an organization to the organization is trying to sell you on joining them. And when it happens because they'll start saying, "Hey, can we walk through our benefits plan?" Well, they're not going to talk to you about benefits if they're not seriously thinking about hiring you. So now it's flipped in the other direction. So it's the same thing with artists. And I think about it, are they indicating that they're serious about this? Yeah, the way they're asking me questions is telling me this. Hey, Scott, if we gave you if we gave you the go ahead next Friday, what kind of timeline do you think it would take for you to complete the job? That's that's an important statement on their part. They're not going to ask you that if they're not serious about that.
Okay, yeah, that's a really, really good point. If somebody's asking you how long they can expect you to do the job and be done with it, that's a good, they're envisioning you doing the job, basically. What other things are good for, say, artists to ask the client to really give a good impression, be confident, things like that?
Sure. So this will sound kind of different, but one of the things I do is I ask questions that I already know the answer to. So one of them might be, well, you probably never have an artist miss a date on the type of work that you do, right? And they're like, "Oh my gosh, let me tell you about this idiot we dealt with." So I know the answer is that happens a lot. And I can also tell them I'm not going to miss a date, and I do at some level, but I'm asking a leading question that I think I already know the answer to.
Mm.
Regarding a deadline, hey, when that person missed the deadline, can you help me understand the impact that it had on your organization? Well, they missed the deadline, which meant the printer was going to be later, which meant this was going to happen. And our show, that these were being handed out at, they were rushing to get them there at the last minute. Well, now
Huh.
you've learned a lot. Nobody wants that. They want it 3 days in advance of the show. It's printed, it's ready to go. You've left no time for that. So asking those types of questions, or ask, with other artists that you work with that you really enjoy working with them, what are one or two things that you just love about artists that you like working with? And they're going to
Oh,
tell you.
that's a great one. Yeah.
So, one or two things, and they'll they'll probably give you three or four. So if you're now building your notebook and your journal of things to do and things not to do, man, every time they tell me something they like, write it down. Every time they tell me something that they don't like that upsets them, write it down so that I don't do that. Um,
Yeah, 'cause
Overcharging, surprise charging, they hate that.
mm,
They hate it.
yeah,
But they're
yeah,
willing to pay it if they said, "Well, I told you 2 rounds of changes and you did 5, so I've
yeah.
gotta charge you more."
Yeah. Okay, yeah, having everything clear up front. But yeah, it's because some customers like promptness. They like it to be done very quickly, and some people like detail. They like the little bitty things that you look at the mural and then you just see more and more, and some people don't care about that. And so,
Yep.
yeah, that's a really good, or like you could, and even so a lot of the times whenever I work with customers, they never hired a muralist before, and so they're not really sure. So
Yep.
maybe we could flip it as to, the art, maybe like the art in your home, or like when you see art, like what stops you and makes you look at it, like what, like maybe things like that. I'm trying to just brainstorm of just questions to ask that are not just like, how big is the wall?" Things like that.
Yeah. The other thing I like to ask is, what would success look like at the end of this project? So
Ooh, that's a good one.
if you ask them that, then guess what they're doing? They're painting a picture, literally. You're painting a mural. In their head, they're imagining what this looks like. Um, and this is actually, you can add to that. This is harder to do, but it's great. So let's say that I ask you, Andrea, what's success going to look like at the end of this project? And you say, well, Scott, if you finish this mural and it's done a week in advance, and we're really sure that it's going to stay on the wall for a year, and the people in the community love it, that's going to look like success. And so then you can actually take that statement and start to lead into something that's even more important. So now back to you, I might say, Andrea, sounds great. And I'm telling you, based on everything we've talked about, you've given me great information about where we're going to paint this, what you want, what the town wants. We're going to approve the artwork. It's going to be a great experience, because I'm going to work hard to make sure that happens, so that when this is over, what you just said is what we're shooting for, and what I'm going to bring to you as part of this agreement. And I want to thank you for that. When that happens, I do want to ask you one thing, is if you're happy at the end of this, a lot of my work comes through referrals. So if it's okay at some point after this project's over, if you really give it a thumbs up and you appreciate the project, if you have somebody in mind that you think could also use my services, back in this direction, that referral would mean a lot to me. How's that sound to you? Well, now you're setting up a referral beforehand. You're not asking them for one. You're
Yeah.
just saying, if I do a great job, you tell me I do a great job. You could return the favor by telling me, oh, I know someone in this town over here that I should introduce you to. So
Oh, yeah.
that is a way different than if you tell them before you do the project, hey, do you have any referrals for me? They're not gonna do that.
Yeah.
But you're setting them up to say, if you're pleased, this would help me moving forward if you know somebody.
Yeah. There we
So
go.
when they
Yeah.
start raving about you, well, looks great. You go back in and go, hey, remember when I said this? Is there anybody? Because they're in the moment of really loving it. That's the time to ask them, are there one or two people that would also like something like this that you could send me to?
That is the moment right after. So we actually, I just got back from a music festival, and today, like it ended yesterday, and today they sent out the email saying, "Hey, do you want to buy tickets for next year?" And I was like, "That's such a smart move, because everybody's coming off of it, having a great time, thinking
Yeah,
about it, telling their friends about it, and they're going to buy tickets for the lowest price today." I'm not going to, but I was like, this is such a good marketing
yeah.
thing, and so that's exactly what you're saying, is while they're happy about it, is there anybody else that that, we could color their walls or anything like that, and like getting that conversation started. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome. Yeah. So I guess to wrap this up, what's your last bits of advice? Are there any other good gems in there? This is all great so far.
Let me see. I think what I'd share one thing because it's in my notes.
Yeah.
When I looked at your website, what you said is you generate business by podcast, through the mural book, because podcast generates interest. The mural book generates revenue, but it's also creating other people that read it and then go, all right, I might go into your program,
Mhm.
and then your membership tutorial. So you have three areas. For me, what I'm learning is that to create additional avenues for where my art can be consumed. So I'm on LinkedIn to generate activity because of my business connections. So I've gotten some really good leads there. I'm trying to get my work now moving to digital. So there's less that, I can sell an actual um, piece that I would have done on the table years ago. But all right, can that print also be thank you cards? Yes, it can in most cases. Can I have this size print and then a larger print? Can I sell the original artwork from the children's book? Yes, I can. All those avenues, and now I'm working into the public speaking side of this to teach artists what to do. And now I'm starting to learn, all right, how do I do videos and stuff like that? So I think understanding that monetizing your art isn't just a one and done. There's a lot of avenues that you can do that will create passive income. You wake up and you go, that's $120 and all I did was sleep last night. And I created a new client. So that's something that I've tried to focus on. The other thing is I did a 10-week course. You've probably heard of SVS Learn, which is a children's book organization. So just trying to get better all the time. I'm constantly trying to learn from people. So podcast, listening to your podcast, to other podcasts helps me out because you got to keep getting better. There's always somebody out there trying to, do business locally or like you do regionally or nationally. So I focus on that as well. And my hope is that in the past 18 months, as I started to build this together, more and more artists that are really accomplished are like, Scott, you've hit on something, because they're very successful, but they keep saying, no one ever taught me this.
Yeah.
I just started my business and all of a sudden I got to understand networking. I don't like to do that. I got to understand running I invoice late, all these things. So I appreciate you having me on today, but that's exciting for me as I kind of work towards retiring from this job and moving into a longer term job on the art side, public speaking and selling my artwork. But I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to chat today.
Yeah, yeah, I love to talk to other business-minded people, and you seem to be doing something similar to me. You wanna share your tips, and I think there's so many artists out there who need it. And, that even coming from me or you or somebody, like, sometimes it's you can give somebody advice on even a certain day, and it takes them hearing it in the moment that they need to hear it. Like, say, so hopefully somebody heard this right before they get on a sales call. It's like sometimes timing is the thing. So I hope you keep doing your thing and sharing your knowledge. We really appreciate it. And this is definitely a hot topic. So I know that I'm gonna get a lot of feedback from this. So thank you.
Well, great. Thanks so much. Nice meeting you. Take care, Andrew.
I'm gonna click end.